Hey, Kath.
Hey, how are you?
Okay.
So
We
Sue,
were writing.
while we're waiting for people to get on, how did your price reduction go?
Excellent.
Did it?
50,000 price reduction.
Wow.
Immediately had 4 appointments scheduled for within the next couple of days. I'm doing an open house on Sunday. I've got agents sending their clients to that. So good. It was a little rough for me doing the because it was a Zoom meeting.
Okay.
I handling the Zoom along with that and going and showing the forms and everything on Zoom was a little bit awkward for me, but I'll smooth it out.
But it worked. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool.
I'm gonna fix my old deal here.
So where's that property?
Route 68 in Mansfield. House was built in 1737. It's got brick walls this thick. It's really cool.
We rode bikes past one of your farmlands out in Chesterfield. The sign was down. Bob got off his bike and went back.
Thank you, Bob.
I was like, yeah, did you see that sign?
Yeah, I got my new sign, so I'm going out and replacing it. But that beggar was supposed to close already, so we're still working on it. Maybe in the next 2 weeks. So, but thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll give it a couple of more minutes here. People seem to be coming in. Got a big weekend plan, Carl?
You know, Wayne, with a 4-month-old, you never have a big weekend planned. My weekend
I guess
plan,
I should ask if Carlo has a big weekend.
yeah, my weekend plan is to cover whatever my wife needs so she gets a little bit of a break. That's my weekend plan. So how about yourself? Big weekend plan?
Golf tournament.
Nice.
Shocking, I know, but
I am playing golf Sunday, so I guess that's my
Very
weekend plan. It's my weekend plan. But
yeah, I'll get there at some point today and then play tomorrow on Sunday.
I'm gonna have to hop on to another Zoom. I have a 10:15 Zoom I gotta hop on.
No problem.
Olivier.
No worries. Tell Olivier I said hello.
So this to me is today's pricing.
No, today is unique selling proposition.
Oh, sorry.
Pricing was last week.
Pricing one is always it's a good one, and I've taught pricing to me is tough to teach sometimes.
Yeah, it's incredibly tough to standardize, right? Because there's so many subtle nuances. And what about this? And what about that?
Right.
So,
especially with this market, because pricing's a unique animal in this market.
well, right, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today is honestly, and can't believe I'm about to say what I'm going to say. Pricing is not as crucial in this market as making sure that the communication flow is set up properly for the seller. So if we're not getting the responses that we need to get, that we react quickly. Right? Because it's really hard to pound the table with a seller right now and go, oh no, you can't get that for it. You know, I mean, because gosh, do we really know what they can get, right?
Well, it's funny too, a quick little story. So I have a not too desirable neighbor. He doesn't keep his house well. I think the family is splitting up. He just put the house on the market. So I go by, and it's with a Remax, but not our office, and it's here in East Brunswick. And I was glad, full of transparency, I was glad not to be involved in the transaction because we're not the friendly, we don't have a relationship. So I walk by the house. He has a mattress on the front yard, and he's got the grass. The grass is high, and he's got like old furniture at the curb. And I'm just like, and I know the agent who has it listed. And I just want to call that agent and be like, wouldn't you at least want like this little part? Are we at the point where we're with pricing that we're worried so little that we're telling people not to take a mattress off the front yard? And be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean I was on the road all this week and I was talking to people about that and I'm like, look, you still have to do the CMA. I mean, you can't just walk in now in this market and go, what do you think? Okay, let's go there. What do I need to do to my house? Oh, it won't matter, right? I mean, those intrinsic things still matter, staging and great photos and all of that.
And I think all that shows our value and our expertise.
Yeah.
You know, I think if we're walking into the house just saying, well, what do you think it's worth? Okay, let's give it a shot. You know, where are they going to see the value that we're bringing, that we all know we bring? And I think it's a shame because luckily we have so many great experienced agents, but there's so many newbies and stuff getting in the business where they're watering that down. I mean, I think it's a time to double down on our professionalism and our expertise and knowledge.
I completely agree with you, my friend. Completely agree.
You guys enjoy the third session.
The third and final session. Dun, dun, dun.
We'll make sure we resend all of this out. And Wayne, I'll give you a call later.
All right, buddy. Be well.
Right.
See you. Bye-bye. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for sticking here with me for 3 weeks in a row. So today we are going to talk unique selling propositions, value propositions, marketing plan, whatever. So I'm just going to jump right in if that's okay with everybody. And I'll be honest with you, this session is a little bit shorter than the others. But it does leave us more time for questions at the end. So we'll see where we end up as far as questions go. So just to remember the staging of everything as we go through this, right? This presentation definitely has 3 very strong sections to it. Okay. And here's what we've covered so far. So in session 1, actually I should say it has 4 parts to it. We covered 2 of them in the very first session. And that is the pre-listing conversation and that pre-listing appointment, right? I still believe in a 2-step process when it comes to listing property. I know in a competitive environment, 2 steps beats 1, and that's what's dropping off that pre-listing packet, writing down lots of notes about the property, that dialogue that we talked about, having the pre-listing questionnaire, because a lot of times on that very initial meeting, you might see things that you're going to have to address, right? I mean, my classics are houses that smell like cigarette smoke, houses that smell like cat urine, slobbering dogs, whatever. There are things you're going to have to address. And the reason I like a 2-step presentation so much is that that gives you time to figure out how to politely deliver the message that your house doesn't smell that great, right? It gives you a chance to practice some dialogue with somebody else and say, well, the house just smelled horrible. What if I say, hey, your house doesn't smell very good? Well, that's probably not the right way to approach it, right? And so you have to start working on dialogue because we all know, as Carl said a minute ago with the guy with the mattress on the front porch, I would say in that case, the agent doesn't have the dialogue down on how do you politely look at someone and go, hey, you kind of need to clean this up. My classics were pet odors, because at the time I wasn't a pet person at all, and yet the house smelled like pets, and so I would always say, I did detect a bit of a pet odor when I was in the property, and we're going to have to address that. Now I love dogs or cats or whatever myself, but it is probably going to be a deterrent to some people, and so we need to address that, right? And again, it gives you a chance to figure out the proper way if their decor is off, or if you're going to need to bring in professional staging or whatever. So that's section 1. Then section 2 is covering their past experiences, right? What they've been through before, and then the relational piece of this. And again, my basic theory in all of this is, if we are not on the same page on the relational part, in that I don't like you and you don't like me, we should get away from each other. And that line of questioning helps us pull out how they're going to react under pressure, I guess would be the easiest way to say it. Then if we agree that relationally we are on the same page, then the next thing is, well, let's talk about what your house is worth, right? That was section 2, which we went through last week, and the dialogue of that and the CMAs and all of those sheets that I gave you. And then if we check off now at the relational piece and we check off now at the market value piece, now the next part is your marketing plan, right? What are you going to do to sell my house? How are you going to justify the fee that you're going to charge me? What are you going to do over and above putting me in multi-list like everyone else will? And that's where unique selling propositions kick in. Now, I'm not going to cover all of the unique selling propositions, okay? Those were actually at about the 4th or 5th slide of session 1, okay? All of the possible things that you could do. I'm just going to cover what I think are probably baseline ones. And then we're really going to talk quite a bit about seller communication back and forth. So the question we have to answer is, why are you being hired? Why does anyone ever hire you? Why does a buyer hire you with a buyer agency? Why does a seller hire you? And I think it comes down to 2 issues. Number one, I think you're being hired for strategy. If you don't have strategies that resonate with me, then, or you don't have strategies above and beyond what I know to do on my own, then you have a really hard time justifying whatever fee you're going to charge me, right? Now, seller strategies were always a big deal. What are you going to do? But now we have to have buyer strategies, right, in this market. How are you going to help me find a house? What are you going to do other than sit back and wait for something to come through multi-list? So strategy is number one. And then the biggest one for sellers is communication. So ultimately, I think that we are paid in this industry for strategy and communication. And if we have great strategies that resonate with the sellers, and if we have a communication protocol, listing property when you get to this level becomes quite easy. So I think the first thing that we need to explain to sellers is kind of how the overall market works, acknowledging that while we do this every day, most people only do this 3 or 4 times in their life. So if the last market that you participated in, say, was 2009, this market's 180 degrees from 2009. Or if the last time you sold a house was 2001, it's different than that market was. The strategies are completely different now. The marketplace is different. So I do think we have to kind of lay out some rules. And part of this is the immutable laws that I talked about last week. Hang on, I've got another person coming in here. There we go. So here's one of the first things that I think that you should have in your presentation. And these are numbers that tend to hold true year over year. Now, obviously, in this market right now, this is not true, okay? But how long should it take to sell a property? I don't know how many of you ever download or read the National Association of Realtors profile of buyers and sellers. Does anybody ever read that? Raise your hand if you ever buy that and read it. It is a wealth of information as to how the marketplace is actually operating. Okay, so I would challenge you to go down. I think it's the last time I got it, I got $29.99 or $35 or something for the download, and I mean it deals with everything. So if you've never gotten it, I would get it because it's got some great stats in it. But year over year in a normal market, about 40% of the properties that sell in less than a month. About 29% of the properties sell between 30 and 60 days. 15% of the properties that actually sell in that 3rd month, and then it starts to drop off the table, right? That's in a normal market. And so what we'd always say to people is like, look, in a normal market, you know what, if your home isn't sold within 30 days, given that we see the traffic that we should and those kind of things, an adjustment may be necessary. Now, Sue, to the situation that you were in, and what I would tell everyone is standardize your materials in this, and then be willing to customize the dialogue. So, like with the suburban property that you had that we talked about last week that you got.
I want to eat.
It would be hard for us to tell a suburban seller, that an adjustment might be necessary in 30 days when no one has sold their house in less than 140 days. It's really hard for me to make a 30-day adjustment case when nobody has done something that quickly, right? This is why, again, you need to analyze all the numbers before you get into the presentation. And it's not always a price reduction. Now, most of the time it is, right? Given that we have condition in line, right? So really there's three factors in selling property: location, condition, and price. And I think one of the biggest fallacies, lies, whatever you want to call it in real estate is location, location, location. Because location's a constant. And we can't pick houses up and move them. Your location is what it is. It's a factor of how many buyers there are. It's a factor of how aggressively we can price, right? And if you have a great location, yes, we might be able to make a more aggressive pricing, but not to the point where we're going to get to like just blow it out of the water. So location is one, pricing is second, and condition is third. So really all we can look at is condition and price. It's our only two variables that we have any say over, unless you own a house moving company and you're going to pick their house up and go move it to a better neighborhood, right? So just speak in reality to people. The only two variables that we have control over are the price of your property and the condition. And again, going back to one of the rules, the condition of the property simply needs to be at the market. If you've over improved your property, I hope you enjoyed it, because buyers are not going to pay for it. And that's a key concept. Okay. Importance of intelligent pricing. Y'all have seen this little pyramid, I'm sure, over the years. I'm just going to give you how I explained it to people, and it tended to kind of resonate with them a little bit. That if we priced your house 15% above its true market value, we'd get about 10% of the buyers in the market to come through your house. Now, what does that buyer look like? What does that buyer say? That's the buyer that has driven by your house for years and said, if that one ever comes on the market, we need to look at buying it. And this would give you a chance to ask a seller, have you ever had anybody knock on your door and say, we've been looking at your house forever, we'd like to buy it? Because if not, that tells us we can't price it up there. The second level is 10% above. That's people that perhaps have said, I only want to live on this street, or I only want to live in this particular part of the neighborhood. If we get to market value, we're going to get 60% of the buyers. The reality is we're never going to get every buyer excited about your property, because buyers start this process with a geographic location and physical features. If we go 10% under the value, we'll get a few more buyers who are just looking for a value. And if we get 15% below market value, now everyone will buy it just because it's a deal. Well, obviously we want to be at market value, or in this market, perhaps in that 10% above. Just remember, in any real estate market, you don't need everyone to be interested in your property. Just those that are looking in your geographic area and price range with the physical features your home possesses. That's the last two lines there at the bottom of that. Okay. I mean, just as if, and as a broker, I used to watch this in sales meetings, and we would do the obligatory at the end of the meeting. It's like, okay, everybody go all around the room and tell me what you got, right? And somebody would say, well, I got a new listing coming up, and it's 20 miles outside of town. And I would just watch everybody start looking at their cell phones. Like, I don't care. And then someone else would mention a house, right? And people were like, whoa, wait a minute, what was that again? And they'd all start taking notes. So that's where you get into the fact that if we don't get the agents excited about your property on the front end, we're never going to get the buyers. So you're experiencing this with the price reduction, right? All of a sudden we go from no activity to now you've got all these phone calls about the property. Sales price versus timing. This little graph is simply designed to kind of blow a hole in the deal when sellers have said, I've got time. I got time. I'm not in a hurry, right? It's like sellers opening dialogue. Please understand, I don't have to sell the house. Well, even though you have time, you want to do this quickly, because absolutely in every market, and we see it now, really see it now, Showings always peak in the first 2 weeks. The very first people that come through your house are the best people you're ever going to see. Every time we introduce a house to the marketplace, there are a pool of buyers sitting out there right now saying, let me know when something new comes up. Let me know when something new comes up. Those are the first people that ever come through any listed property. By the way, they're also the best people that ever come through any listed property. They are the people that have already done their research. They've looked at a myriad of houses, and in this market, they probably missed out on 3 or 4, and they're running out of time. One of the rules that I believe plays out in this deal is buyers don't purchase until they have to. If buyers have the luxury of time on their side, they'll continue to look. Because if you sit down with a buyer and you have them describe their dream home, it's always 2 price range above what they can afford. If you can spend $30,000 for a house, your dream home is a $50,000 house. You can spend $300,000, it's $500,000. If you can spend $3 million, and I say, what's your dream home? It'll be a $5 million house. So buying a house at some level is a system of compromise. Well, I'm not going to compromise if I have time on my side of the ledger. So what we're looking for when we first put a property on the market is that there's this pool of buyers, and they should hit us quickly in this deal. Now we're seeing it right now as agents, right? You have that feeling that if you put a house out there and it's not gone in like 4 or 5 days, we've got something really wrong. And that's why we have to constantly, because that may be correct and it may not be correct, we have to be constantly analyzing the marketplace. And to me, that's your value to a seller. Ongoing, free-flowing market analyzation. Buyers absolutely buy in price brackets. You can run the numbers however you want to. You will see that when properties sell, they do not break out of their price bracket. It is so rare. And when they do break out of their price bracket, it's normally because they have a longer market time. So Sue, when you did the 15,000 price reduction, now you got a new pool of buyers in there who suddenly are excited about this property, right? And they all want to come in the very beginning.
I did a $50,000 price reduction.
Oh, I thought you said 15.
No, 50.
Well, yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it. Well, I was in the 650 price range, so I dropped it to 599.
Perfect. So here, okay, so I'm gonna use this as somewhat of an example. And y'all know this, but explaining this concept to sellers is a huge deal. Payment-driven economy, number one, even in that price range. Probably a payment, a loan. There's probably going to be a loan involved in most markets. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Buyers find out they can spend 600. They start out looking at like 450 or 500. They don't like any of them because what they really want is 700. But they have plenty of time to continue to look. But you're at 650. The agent with the buyer knows there's no reason to show this buyer a 650 house because they can only go to 600. And that buyer is on that agent constantly saying, isn't there something new? Can't you find me something new? Come on, I got to buy a house because I'm running out of time. I got to make a decision. Boom, you drop this 650 house down to 599, and here comes a new flood. At the end of the day in real estate, all we're playing with is how long it takes for us to hit the 3 levels that it takes to sell any house. And here they are. 3 level, every house that sells, I promise you, goes through these 3 levels. Level number 1, agent excitement.
Isn't that the same letter?
How do we get an agent excited about your property? We get an agent excited about your property by where you are and how much you're asking and nothing else. And we're not going to get every agent excited about your property, and we don't need to. We're only going to get the agents excited about your property that have a buyer in that price range in that location. So Sue, at your $50,000 higher price, if we saw a smattering of showings, what we knew was we didn't have the agents excited about it. The agents didn't see the value there.
Exactly.
The second level is the agents see the value there, and now we have buyers in great numbers. Mm-hmm. And historically, we would say 8 to 10 showings in the first 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Now we could say, golly, 8 to 10 showings in the first 2 days or in the first 2 hours, depending on price range, mm-hmm. right? And that just simply meant we got to the second level and the agents thought the value was there and they brought their buyers through. The point we have to get to, though, is when we check back for feedback, we're always one of the top 2 or 3 homes. Because what one buyer likes, they all like. What one buyer dislikes, they all dislike, because literally they're all looking at the same houses. Now, here's the deeper explanation to a seller. So if we put your home on the market and we get no showings and we get no internet traffic at all, and I get no calls from agents, we have a problem. And we're going to have to address that problem quickly together, because the only people that care if your house sells are me and you. So if we put it out there and no one comes through, we have a problem. We need to address it. Secondly, we hear this from sellers all the time. Well, we're getting a lot of showings. That must mean we're getting closer to a sale. Not really. If we get a lot of showings, but no one comes back a second time in a normal market, right now they don't have time to come back a second time, or no one makes any run at trying to buy the house, we have a problem and we have to address it. We have to consistently be one of the top 2 or 3 houses. That's this positioning thing. Every house that sells goes through these 3 levels. Now, right now, because of the market, we're going through these 3 levels in a day, right? And all of a sudden, bam, everybody thinks this is a great house. It's better than what we saw. Let's fight for it. So I would say, if nothing else, internalize dialogue around this and make this part of your listing presentation. Because I really do. I believe that every house that sells goes through these 3 levels. All we're really playing with is, how long is it going to take you to go through the 3 levels? And by the way, the faster you go through the 3 levels as a seller, the more money you're going to get, because you have control. So now let's talk a marketing plan, right? Which really is kind of a marketing plan, kind of not, a lot of communication. Our objective in selling your home and in marketing your home are 4-fold. Number 1, to get as many qualified buyers into your home as possible. Now here is a selling proposition that I would suggest that you say to every seller. I will promise you that I will not bring any buyer into your home that is not qualified to buy it. However, I cannot make that promise on behalf of the industry. When we check back for feedback, you're going to discover that some of the people that came through your house weren't a buyer for your house. Some of the people aren't a buyer at all, and the agent just doesn't know it yet. But I promise you, I will never show your home to someone that is not qualified, because I think it's unfair for you to have to leave, take the dogs if they have dogs, the kids, the whatever, for somebody that I know on the front end is not a buyer for your house. So that's my promise to you, if that's okay. I'm not going to waste your time and have you go through all of what you need to go through when we know it's not a buyer. Is that okay? And to a person, every seller will say, thank you so much. Now, where this becomes a value proposition for you, you ever get that snarky buyer or snarky person that's like, I want to see this house right now. I want to see your listing. And you start going down the qualification questions and they won't answer any of them. And then sometimes agents are afraid to not show the house, afraid the seller will find out you had a call about the house. Now this gives you complete leeway to go, I'm sorry, I can't show you the house, because I promised my seller I wouldn't show it to someone who wasn't qualified, and you won't tell me whether you're qualified or not. I can't show it to you. Number 2, so that you can get the highest dollar value with the least amount of problems. If we're doing our job right, your life is completely interrupted. Hopefully for a very short amount of time, hopefully with multiple offers. Number 3, to communicate the results of our activities to you. The biggest complaint against our profession is we put a sign in your yard and you never hear from us again. I promise you that won't happen. And I'll show you exactly how we're going to do this. And 4th, to look for the best way of exposing your property to potential buyers. That's the marketing plan. That's the marketing that we do. Number 1, just by the simple fact that we list your house, you're going to show up on every internet portal in the land. My job is to, when I get calls through those portals, be able to sort through those, okay? Because in every case, just because we get it in multi-list, they grab the feeds and it goes, okay? Now, anything you're doing over and above that, right? If you're Zillow Premier, something like that, then make sure at this point that you drive that point home. Okay. But the reality is most of these portals, and I just threw a bunch of portals on here, but most of these portals, that's automatic. It's a scrape from Multilist. So that's really that doesn't differentiate you that much, right? Now, if you're Zillow Premier and you can show them your Zillow Premier stats and your numbers, then obviously I would drive home that point. Or if you have an enhanced deal on realtor.com or whatever, this is the point where you would bring that up and tell me specifically why that matters to me. Buyer profile system. This is a sexy way of saying I've been working with buyers and I might have a buyer for your house internally, right? Somewhere in my database, I might have a buyer for your house. If I do, that's the first people that I will try to bring through your house. I'm not promising you I have a buyer for your house, but I may have. And if you've been doing this long enough over time and you have perhaps had a Zillow play or whatever, and you've been keeping track of people, whether it's Follow Up Boss, Perfect Storm, whatever your CRM is, and you can cross-reference this listing to the buyers and their criteria, then you would have a buyer profile system and you would have the ability to say, I might have a match in my computer system that I just don't know about yet. What's the benefit to a seller? Is these are people that I know are ripening on the vine, if you will. Every time I get a new listing, I send it out to these people. And it gives you perhaps a strong number of serious prospects. So one of the things that will come up when you go down this original line of questioning, right? And specifically, it's the question of what do you expect from me, right? If you remember that question, it's about question 7 or 8. What do you expect from me if you choose me as your agent? People will say to you, I expect you to sell my house. And the deeper level of that is, well, hold on a second. Do you expect me to sell your house? Or do you expect your house to sell? Oh no, if I'm going to hire you to sell my house, I expect you to sell my house. Now, we all know that like 80% of the transactions are going to involve 2 agents because of the power of Multilist. But this is a value proposition in the context of I expect you to sell my house. And then you could refer back and say, you know, when you said you expected me to sell your house, the odds are really good I'm not going to. But this is the strategy that I use. I keep in contact with buyers, and I'll cross-reference your house to those people to see if that's somebody that I could bring through early. If you do any kind of targeted social media, any Facebook, if you're Instagram, whatever, right? Make sure that you tell them and that you can succinctly show them how you do it differently than other people do. Okay? There are some people that are really great at this. There are other people that don't do any kind of targeted social media. It's not like today's world, you have to do targeted social media. But if you're going to do it, explain it. I do believe everyone should target market the neighborhood around the house. I do believe you should send out just listed postcards, because I do believe that one of the main ways that property actually sells is because the neighbors know someone who wants to move into their neighborhood in a lot of cases. So we just want to get the neighborhood working for you. I mean, that's the dialogue. I'm going to send out these postcards announcing to them that we've listed your property. I think you should also, every time you hold an open house, I think you should figure out who the move up neighborhood is, who you believe will possibly be buying that house, and invite those people to the open house. I've got a buddy that just crushes open houses, and this is what he does for every open house. But I think you should target market the neighborhood with just listed cars. We just want to get the neighborhood working for you. It's still one of the main ways people find houses. It's validated by the NAR profile of buyers and sellers. One of the things that comes up on the whole Zillow thing, when you start listening to a lot of Zillow calls and you start trying to track these people, they rarely buy the house they initially contacted the agent off of. It's very rare. Okay, so, and here's the other thing I would tell you about this market. Even though you may be selling listings before you have a chance to do anything with them, go ahead and do whatever your marketing plan would have been. Listings are always a leverage point for you. So let's say that you list a property in a neighborhood and you sell it in 6 hours. I would still send out a just listed postcard. And then I would still send out a sold postcard afterwards. I would still keep the same marketing. I'm watching people say, well, I'm not going to do that because I'm saving money. You're not playing the long game then. And the long game is about market presence. The long game is about this person sold so many houses in my neighborhood, right? So we need to make sure that we go ahead and continue the marketing plan even in an overheated market. Communication plan. This is the biggest part of this. Guarantee you that once a week, I will call you to discuss your property. Guaranteed. Even if we haven't had a showing, I guarantee you, I will call you once a week. Now, if you have an assistant, if you have a team, it doesn't necessarily have to be you that makes the phone call. But if it's not going to be you, tell them exactly who it's going to be and go to the next step and tell them exactly when they're going to get the phone call. I had my assistant was, my listing coordinator was named Mary. And I would tell people, Mary will call you every Friday morning between 10 and 12. You can expect a phone call every Friday from Mary between 10 and 12, even if no one has shown your house. Okay? Set very tight communication protocols, or as tight as you believe you can. Now, if you don't have an assistant, then you need to block out in your calendar a morning or an afternoon, whatever works, same time every week, that is sacred time. That's when you're going to contact all of your sellers. The only way relationships ever go south is when we don't check off on expectations and we stop communicating with people. And you cannot over communicate to a seller. I've never had a seller call me and say, you're darn agent, they just call me all the time and tell me what's going on. I think you should give some kind of a feedback guarantee when you do have showings. Mine was 48 hours. Maybe you can't do it consistently in 48 hours. Make it 72 hours. Make it 96 hours. However you want to do it, but have a feedback guarantee that you are going to call your seller after every showing and tell them exactly what the people said about their house. And then if we haven't had any showings, I'm going to call you every Friday between 10 and 12. I'm going to communicate with you a lot. Here are some questions that I think work really well when you're going for feedback. What did your client think about the layout? Specifically, what did they like or not like? What's their price range? And as I would explain this to a seller, I said, here's where we start determining that a lot of times these people weren't even buyers. Is, well, they just wanted to take a look at it. Really, it's out of their budget. Of the homes that your client looked at, is our listing in one of the top 3? If not, why isn't it? Who's beating us? If we are one of the top 3, then the question I will immediately ask that agent is, what do we have to do to be number 1? Now, I will never play your hand out, but as soon as I find out what that is, I will immediately call you and say, here's where we are with that buyer. What do you want to do? And if you want to make a move, or we decide we need to make a move, at that point, I would call them back. I would never, however, play your hand out without your approval. Have they bought another home? And if they did, where? And if they did, why? And as an agent, could you give us some comments about the home or its price? You're going to know what every person says about your property when they come through, because this is crucial to this whole process. We've got to know what true buyers or what people looking at it are saying. And we've got to stay together. We've got to have this free flow of communication. Please don't, I'm not going to edit this stuff. I'm going to tell you exactly what they're saying, and then we have to decide together whether we need to make a move or not. In addition to that, every 2 weeks, you're going to get a report in the mail. It's going to show you the total number of properties you're now competing against, their average listed price. I'll also show you how many of them may or may not have gone under contract in the last 2 weeks, and the average asking price of those that went under contract. If we get a report that says nothing happened, don't worry, because we didn't miss anybody. But all of a sudden, if we get a report that 2 or 3 houses sold and we weren't one of them, we got to have a conversation. We have to react. So to sum it up, I'm going to call you every Friday, going to communicate with you within 48, 72 hours, whatever, of every showing. And every 2 weeks, I'm going to give you a new snapshot of the marketplace of how we stack up, because the marketplace constantly moves. And this is just a fact, right? If you sit around and think about it. It is now, what, 11:45 where you guys are, 11:45 where I am. Marketplace is different right now than it was at 8 o'clock this morning, which is different than it was at 8 o'clock last night, which is totally different than it was at 8 o'clock yesterday morning, because there's constantly people, new houses coming on the market, new houses being sold, new houses falling off the market, new buyers coming in. The market constantly moves. And if we don't have a very tight protocol for communicating with our seller will tend to get in a silo. And they'll think that the same rules that applied the day we listed it are still in play. And we know they're not, because the marketplace constantly moves. So I think those are the 3 levels of communication that become paramount with dealing with sellers. Call you once a week just to check in. Call you after every showing. Give you a bi-weekly report every 2 weeks, let you know what's going on in the market. When you do that, then the price reduction conversation is much easier, because it's like, hey, have you been looking at their reports? 3 more, one at a time, right? Or sometimes when we're doing we know we have to get a price reduction because we're not getting any traffic. We're not getting through those 3 levels of sales. I've learned over the years that having this great communication strategy with your seller, it trumps any kind of marketing or Facebook posts or anything like that. Okay. I believe personally that this should be a phone call. Serious conversation ought to be a phone call. Don't rely on showing time or whatever your showing suites or whatever your automated protocols are to send this stuff. It's just better when you get to talk to people. And then lastly, the cancellation guarantee. You can fire me anytime you want to. It's like listing your house 24 hours at a time. If you decide you don't want to deal with me anymore, you can fire me. If you decide that the marketplace has moved to a point where you don't want to play anymore, well, let's just stop. What I would tell you is, and this is probably the biggest of all guarantees, almost to a person with every agent that I've talked to over the years, if a seller called and said, I think I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, almost every agent would let them out. And those that wouldn't let them out should let them out. But almost every agent would let them out. And yet nobody wants to tell a seller that you could fire me if you want to. If we're not getting along, you can fire me. If you don't like my marketing protocol, you can fire me. And I think we need to just bring it up. It's a powerful line when you say, look, if you find out I'm full of beans or whatever, you can fire me. This is how we're going to do this. And it totally resonates with sellers. I learned this calling expireds. They got locked into these long listing agreements. Here's the actual cancellation guarantee, right? I would put this in my pre-listing packet. I would make a big point about it in the listing presentation. So now we've gone through, here's your past experiences. We agree that we see the world the same way. We agree on what your property is worth. Do we agree on the ways that I'm going to go market it? Do we agree on how often we're going to communicate? The answer is going to be yes, 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 yes. Let's go. So I would close with a cancellation guarantee. Okay, now I'm going to open it up for questions. Now, admittedly, this is not everything, right? I didn't go down the road of professional staging. I didn't go down the road of professional photography, right? If those are things that you do, make a big deal out of it. The whole idea of unique selling propositions, if you will. So I will mention a gentleman's name that I will bet you've never heard of. The guy's name was Claude Hopkins. Anybody ever heard of Claude Hopkins?
No.
Okay. Claude Hopkins is the father of unique selling propositions. He wrote a book called My Life in Scientific Advertising. He wrote it back in the 1920s. You don't need to go get it and read it, okay? But let me tell you what Claude Hopkins was famous for. Claude Hopkins was famous for Pepsodent toothpaste, okay? So, interestingly, Pepsodent hired Claude Hopkins to see if he could figure out a way so they could sell more toothpaste. Prior to Pepsodent toothpaste, toothpaste had no taste. So you know how when you brush your teeth and you get that fresh tingly feeling in your mouth? Did you know that has nothing to do with cleaning your teeth? That has to do with the little acid that Claude figured out how to put in Pepsodent, so it would abrade your gums and it gave you this fresh feeling. It had nothing to do with cleaning your teeth. So then later on in his career, Schlitz Beer contacted Claude Hopkins and they said, we want to move to be #1 in the market. And he said, let me come and go to your brewery. So he goes to the brewery and he says, give me a tour. So they give him a tour and he said, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And he comes back and he said, all right, here's how we're going to take you to #1. He goes, I noticed that even though that your plant sits on the shores of Lake Michigan or whatever the Great Lakes was that it did, and you can get your water out of that lake, you don't. You've dug artesian wells deep into the soil to make sure that you get really pure water for your beer. And that's how we're going to take you to #1. And they looked at him and they go, you're nuts. You get out of here. Everybody has artesian wells that makes beer. It's how you make beer. And he goes, I didn't know that. They were #1 within 6 months. Because rather than saying our beer is pure, they tagged why it was pure. Remember when and you may not remember, remember when Budweiser came out with a born on date on beer?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that that was always on a bottle of beer? It was coded for delivery drivers, so they'd know when to rotate the stock. And all of a sudden, the guys at Budweiser went, wait a minute. If we just make this where the public can see it, they'll think we have fresher beer than everybody else. Mm-hmm. This is the same thing with Southwest Airlines, which I think is one of the classic cases of unique selling propositions. When everyone started charging for bags, what did Southwest come out and advertise? Your bags fly free. We love bags. Now, what they didn't tell you behind the scenes was they were raising their normal fares to compensate for the fact that they weren't going to charge you for bags. But they'd already positioned themselves as being the cheapest carrier early on. It's amazing the number of people that only fly Southwest because they still think it's the cheapest carrier. And it's not. But that's why Southwest, if you want a Southwest ticket, you have to buy it on the Southwest website. They don't play with Orbitz and all these others, right? That is the essence of unique selling proposition. So I only say all that big thing to tell you this. People don't know what you do. So take the things that you do and spin them up into huge marketing things. And your success in listings will go through the roof. Always does. All right, there. I said questions and I went off on a story. Any questions?
Wayne, I'm not sure if we ever, sorry, this is not a question. I'm not sure if we ever received the first presentation slides.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can talk to Carl about that or were you about getting those?
You should have gotten them. Did y'all not get the first ones?
No, I received them.
Okay,
I got them.
Okay. And I will find.
Yeah, Jeffrey, check with Carl, and then I'm going to be talking to him in the next couple of days anyway. Check with Carl; he's got them. Better than that, email me, Wayne@stfconsult.com, and I'll just find the email that I sent to Carl and I'll just forward it to you. That'll be easier.
Wayne at
stfconsult.com.
Okay, thank you.
You bet, no problem. Okay, guys, I appreciate your time. I really do. Hopefully I'll get north sometime and meet you all face to face.
This was great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wayne.
You bet. Have a great day.
Very good.
See you
You
soon.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.